Do you wonder why some melodies hook you immediately? In this video, I'll dive deep into the hidden meanings of the beginning of a melody. Specifically, I'll focus our attention on one single note, the first one. It's funny when you think about it, because I studied music a little bit everywhere, and even though I've had many years of music teachings, I don't remember anyone ever talking about this particular subject. For me, this idea about connecting some emotion to the first note of a melody came when I was conducting some Mozart operas a few years ago. And the advantage of studying Mozart operas is that, of course, the music is classical, so the melodies are in general quite simple. And also because it's opera, well, you've got the text, and with the text it gives some meaning as well to the first note. So it seemed quite obvious to me that it's actually possible to give meaning to the first note of a melody. By the way, be welcome anytime to leave some comments below and to engage in a conversation together. So let's finally analyze what the hidden meanings are of the first note of a melody. But just before starting, a little disclaimer. The type of melodies that I consider in these videos are melodies that start on a tonic chord, so a first degree chord. Of course, some melodies start with an appoggiatura or an upbeat. In that case, I'll try to give meaning to the note just after the upbeat or the appoggiatura. Whenever we look at the first note of a melody, we could give meaning depending on what note of the chord that first note is. In the case that the first note of a melody is the root of the chord, I will call this case the grounded. Let's have a listen from a first example coming from the Swan Lake. Do you also feel that when you listen to this melody, it really feels very grounded? The first note is the root note of the chord, and of course many other factors play in this sense of grounding. We've got a march here, it's the beginning of the Swan Lake Ballet, there is percussion playing, there is a full tutti orchestra playing, that's for sure. But on top of that, Tchaikovsky decided to use as the first note of the melody the root. So at least noticing that this first note of the melody is the root of the first chord gives me at least this idea of grounded. Oh, and by the way, all the examples in this video are coming from Tchaikovsky's ballet, The Swan Lake. I recently uploaded another video showing why Tchaikovsky's music is so special. If you're interested in that video, you'll find it somewhere here above, and I also leave a link in the description below. Let's now have a look to another example. This example is also quite interesting, right? Because on top of having the first note as root of the chord, Tchaikovsky doesn't change anything about the bass line in these first 8 bars, which really roots this melody in the oboe as something unmovable in this place, very grounded. By the way, I've analyzed the entire Swan Lake for you, so for all the different melodies in the Swan Lake, I've written down in what case we are for the first note. If you want to have a look, it's completely free, and I leave a link in the description below this video. Let's now have a look at the second case where the melody starts on the third of the first chord. I call this case the Explorer. Here is one example for you. In this example, it does also feel quite grounded, right? But because we start on the third in the melody, and it can go up and it can go down depending on every case, and that's why I call this case the Explorer. Do you see how Tchaikovsky starts off with the third and then goes down, but on the second try he goes up to the fourth, one note higher than the first note. So he continuously explores where this melody can lead us. Let's now have a listen at a second example where the melody starts off with a third. Of course, these are twice examples by Tchaikovsky that are waltzes and that are in A major, that's for sure. But do you see when Tchaikovsky starts on the third that he tries twice to do something? We don't really know where this melody goes, and then he goes a little bit down, and afterwards he goes a little bit up. And so this whole melody starts with the third, yes, but then continues to explore where will it lead us going up or going down, hence why I call the second case the explorer. Let's now have a look at the third case of where the first note can lie. In this case, the first note is the fifth of the chord, and I'll call this the hopeful. Let's start with the first example. If you know the music of the Swan Lake, you will directly recognize that this is in fact the full beginning of the Swan Lake. Tchaikovsky starts this whole beginning with an F sharp in the oboe, completely alone. Of course, F sharp being the fifth of this first chord, which is of course B minor. But this first melody then evolves into hope. If you have already seen the Swan Lake, you know that it's kind of a sad story at the end, of course, but before the ending and before death, there is hope, there is love, and there is something that comes alive thanks to this first note being the fifth of the chord. Let's now have a look at a second example, starting with the fifth. This is for me such a great example for the hopeful concept. Tchaikovsky starts on the fifth of the chord, of course, with a healthy and warm sound in the violins. And then it goes down, that's for sure, but then it goes up again on the second phrase. And this going up and down around the E flat, which is of course the fifth of the first chord, is exactly what I mean with the hopeful. We don't really know where yet Tchaikovsky is leading us, and sometimes it goes up with the hope, sometimes it goes down, but then it goes up again, and this is exactly the third case. You may be wondering why all these examples come from Tchaikovsky's ballet music, the Swan Lake. It's honestly quite simple. I'm conducting the Swan Lake in a few days from now, and so it is exactly that piece that I'm currently working on. So, this being said, I'd love to hear your feedback and your ideas. You can leave your comments below. If this video was interesting for you and you want to follow along, then be welcome to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.